Today we meet James Dare and he shares the journey of the Salad Project, a restaurant chain focused on healthy, customisable eating with his best friend and co-founder Florian. He discusses the challenges of how COVID actually gave them time to perfect their business and the dynamics of running a business with a partner with similar skill sets. James reflects on lessons learned from mistakes and the significance of enjoying the entrepreneurial journey and advises anyone to have a go if they have a passion. I hope you enjoy. Hi, James. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Exciting one, this. I think what's always good is if we kick off these sessions by getting our listeners to get a bit of background to understand how you've ended up here as a guest on Swim Against the Tide, talking about the Salad Project and just how amazing the growth has been. But it's quite good to rewind a little bit and give some context. I think I've spoken to a few people like this. I've got a couple of my oldest sons are at uni at the moment with no idea what they're going to do, doing very generic marketing business studies courses, and they won't ever listen to me. And I'll sort of say, look, you might start here and end up over here, but they don't believe that. So if they hear it from you and hear that journey of how you've got from hospitality into where you are now, it might go in their thick heads, hopefully.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks very much, Steve. Just to give a little context for most of your listeners who definitely won't know what the Salad Project is, we are a restaurant chain based in London. We currently have 8 restaurants, one including a dark kitchen. We are a restaurant group that's kind of focused around healthy, customizable eating. We've obviously, hence the name, there's quite a big focus there on salads, but we do kind of genuinely sell kind of whole, kind of simple food, but that tastes great. So fundamentally, how did this start? I do the Salad Project with my business partner and one of my very, very dear friends, a guy called Florian. And what's quite interesting about our journey is, a lot of people kind of fall into hospitality jobs out of, a bit of an impulse passion into like, I love restaurants, I'd like to do restaurants. But for whatever reason, me and Flo always kind of decided to study hospitality. So it's very rare in the UK, but it's a little bit less rare in Europe. We both met at a university in Switzerland called EHL, which is based in Lausanne. And it's effectively a hospitality school, but it kind of runs as a business school. And just instead of talking about business A, it's always around a hotel group or a restaurant group. Anyway, so me and Flo met there and had a great 4 years together where, we learned a lot about hospitality, learned a lot about service, a lot about quality of, customer relations, and a lot about kind of how to build businesses. And hospitality has always been very entrepreneurial, so it's always kind of been something that they do preach. But what that university didn't do very well at the time was actually make you want to work in hospitality. It became one of those things where if you said, yes, my name is James and I'd actually like to work in a hotel or restaurant, you were kind of like, what a loser.
Why did you do that? Yeah, even though we taught you that for 4 years.
Exactly. And, excuse the pun against your podcast, but it was, you swim against the tide, right? In terms of like hospitality is shoved down your throat there, but you're kind of like, maybe I should do something else. And so a lot of people go to that university and then go off to work in kind of private banking, marketing, PR, events, lots of other stuff, because genuinely they come out of that school being very good with customers and building relationships. And so me and Flo did that. We left and did kind of corporate jobs. I worked for Expedia. Flo worked in hotels, but in the sales department. And then, couple of years of doing that and really kind of, very conventionally with how a lot of people start in hospitality, decided we hate our corporate jobs, hated, being behind a desk, hated sales calls. It just really wasn't for us. So, we really kind of decided, actually, we do want to go back into hospitality. It's something we really enjoy. It's something we feel we're good at. And it's something that we miss in our day-to-day lives. And we wanted to kind of take a leap of faith and start our own thing. The only issue for me and Flo was, neither of us could really cook anything more than a bacon sandwich at that point. And So, a lot of like people who are in hospitality have this dream of, opening the best restaurant in London. That might be a 12-seat cozy restaurant in Shoreditch, which, charges extortionate amount and just generally is the best food in London. But that was never really on the cards for us because, we just never had the facilities. And so we always looked at it in terms of, okay, well, the UK, for whatever reason, has a relatively kind of, not a super intense food culture as opposed to, Italy or France or Spain. And for some reason in this country, we love a chain, right? More than anywhere in Europe, at least. And so we always were kind of interested in, okay, like we want to find a concept that works from a kind of hospitality food perspective, but also a concept that, we can build a business on, right?
Yeah.
So that was what really excited us, is like, how do we build a business? Just so happens to be that this business is in food. That was the original thing. And, what's so great about hospitality is you do not have to reinvent like the system, and I always kind of feel I'm very grateful that, people who work in pharmaceuticals who are like, oh, we've invented a pill that has cured X, Y, and Z. Like, brilliant, great, but like impossible to think about. Whereas, there's been salad bars in London for God knows how long. I mean, as far as I can remember, as far as my dad can remember, there's always been an option of a salad bar. But we just thought we could improve every angle of it by 10, 15, 20, 30% and kind of cohesively bring a much better product to the table. And so that's what we did. Unfortunately, we quit our jobs just before COVID, which in a way, obviously the pandemic meant a lot of things for a lot of different people. Obviously for a lot of people, a lot of bad things. But it was, if I was to focus really on from a business perspective, it was probably one of the better things that's happened to us. We thought very naively that we'd quit our jobs in November and by April we'd be open. Now, obviously,
simple, easy, isn't it?
Simple.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you see all these restaurants opening all the time, a lot which aren't anything you've heard of, and you're like, okay, well, must be doable. Very naive, very wrong. And so at least COVID kind of allowed us to look to anyone and be like, we have an excuse, instead of just kind of like, why is it taking you 2 years? And
also there were different rules, weren't there, about as the world slightly opened up, there was like percentages of people. I've heard you on another podcast talk about this, and I forgot you. It's amazing how the brain forgets. So you were nearly like given a little test audience that got slightly bigger and bigger and bigger over that period.
Yeah, so we eventually found a site, which again, due to COVID, was an incredible first site for us because, we went into this very naively, deciding what our rent should be based on an article on how to run a Subway franchise in the UK 7 years ago that said you needed X around kind of capex, and this is how much a fit out costs, and this is how much a rent should be. And so we took that as like how much money we raised. And anyway, so what would have got us probably literally a shoebox in some kind of dodgy part of town pre-COVID got us this lovely store right opposite Spitalfields Market post-COVID. And so it gave us a really great opportunity to open our first store in a wonderful location. But you're right, we were opening around that kind of Freedom Day time, if you remember. So, we were a couple of weeks away before, in theory, masks could start to come off. But, people were back in the office 2 days a week, kind of max. And like that was still regulated by the government about how quickly you could return. So we opened with, full mask, full COVID restrictions. But as you said, it was really great because we made a hell of a lot of mistakes in that first store. I mean, frankly, we opened up effectively what must be considered a domestic kitchen, and quickly realized that, that was the budget we built, was a domestic kitchen. And every couple of months, our product was successful, but every couple of months, the government would say, okay, well, 30% more people can come back to work. And we'd see that announcement on a Friday, and on Monday, the queue would be 30% bigger. And, our job was over the weekend to try and find another fridge that could help support that 30% increase. And, we look at that store now, and it's a wonderful store and has a lot of memories for us. but it's very different to how it was originally. We just made some stupid mistakes, but we're very lucky as well because it's a very small store in hindsight, and you can't tell that we did that much retrofitting because it all just about works. And anyway, so fast forward to now, Salad Project has seen a lot of great success. We opened a following store in Bank and then kind of moved to the West End and then opened a couple of more stores since, raised some money, kind of got some great people on board. And now, we're sitting at 8 stores with several more to open this year. And, the response from the public, I guess, has been overwhelmingly positive in terms of what we offer and kind of what was there before. And just kind of, I don't want to use the word being on trend because I think that makes it sound like it's a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
People have always wanted kind of healthy food that they can customize, but it just wasn't there before. And so, long may it continue.
Fantastic. There's so much to unpick there. I mean, it's interesting. Don't worry, I've got my questions. I've been a good boy and we're prepared. In terms of, did you and Flo have a passion for the product, if that makes sense? Is it something that, because a lot of people talk about trying to solve a problem that's dear to them and that's why it's done so well. Did you guys want the product that you now offer, if that makes any sense?
So I think there's a couple of different ways to look at this. Yes, fundamentally, I wanted the product we offered, right? Which I think is very different to saying that we are big salad fans.
Yeah.
Right? We weren't getting salads in London beforehand because they were awful. And so, yes, we were passionate about producing the product we have now. But I mean, I wouldn't say we were like, if you were to ask our friends before, what are James and Flo passionate about? Would it not have been salads? And I think that's
going on and on about bloody tomatoes. I don't know.
And I think that's really played into our strength. Obviously, we have a wonderful culinary director, Clementine, who I'm sure we will speak about more later on, who does all of our menu and stuff. But I think the fact that we are, in our opinion, a very good cross-section of our general consumer has really helped because we've never wanted to be too niche in our kind of offering of being too healthy, being too plain, too, small because it had to be under 300 calories. We wanted it to be mass market in terms of people like myself who wanted to kind of eat healthy, but also, didn't want to feel the need to rush back to Pret to get another baguette 30 minutes after their salad. And I think that's really helped us because, our customer base is it's very varied from, the kind of 18-year-old student who wants to eat something healthy to the 65-year-old businessman who's been having lunch in the city for 40 years, and I think our passion for a product now has kept us on that course of being a very mass market. We've never let it get too far one way or too far another.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Especially because your locations are quite different, aren't they? Well, not massively, but the West End's very different to Bank and some of the more, maybe where a lot of the people office workers, if that makes sense. So you're seeing a different demand. Do you alter the range for each area, or is it not just that people select different product?
No, we don't alter the range. I would say, well, yes, they are very different in lots of ways. I think it probably does a little bit of a disservice to how great the West End is and kind of that Fitzrovia area. Yeah. There's a lot more offices than I think people think of off the bat. And so they tend to be more creative, sure. But, someone who works with numbers and someone who works with, on a Adobe Pro all day, they still like the same things generally to eat. And obviously our store in Spitalfields always kind of catered very much to half of a Shoreditch crowd and half of a city crowd. So apart from our Bank store, which is obviously kind of smack in the middle of a city, I'd say from the beginning we've always had a great mix of customers from kind of real kind of suit and booted and then kind of more creative types.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's good though, isn't it? Because if you have that spread, then you're right. You know that your offer's going to work anywhere. And just in terms of growth, and we'll keep going, we'll keep flying around. Do you think you need an intensity of population? Is that one of the key ones of where you would build future stores? Like, is it always going to be London and then other major cities, European cities, or do you think you can stretch out in the UK cities?
I don't know. I think it really is something that you kind of do need to try before I can give an answer. The obvious answer is yes, you need the density of a population, right? We are at a premium price point for your kind of everyday lunch. So there's no denying, while we are mass market, I'd say we are a treat for a decent amount of people when it comes to their lunch. We're not a
Yeah.
meal deal.
It's not an
right?
everyday. It's not an everyday. It's maybe your Friday treat or it's their Thursday
Yeah.
treat. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of, yeah, so you got to be honest about that. But at the same time, um, there's different types of business models, right? There's the business model in Fenchurch, which relies on a, incredibly compact couple of hours of intense trade where we're staffed up, the customers come in all at once, and it kind of merges into a successful business model and then all disbands. That works at Fenchurch, great. But I do think there's obviously an opportunity in a kind of quieter town where, the demand might be more trickling through the day, but then you just adjust in the rents you're paying, you adjust in the staff you're paying. I mean, all I know is I don't think this necessarily means that you should do this, but the amount of messages we get saying, just went to the salad project, amazing, I need you to open Broadstairs. And it's like, I like Broadstairs, but I think it's obviously the opportunity cost of, if I was to suddenly say everyone to Broadstairs, I think there's probably easier kind of lower hanging fruits to go for.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do feel pretty kind of optimistic about, the kind of residential areas which can, I think the demand would grow quite rapidly if we went somewhere like that.
Yeah. And is a majority of customers taking it away, or are they eating in some of your stores?
Yeah, I mean, categorically, yes, the majority is takeaway, right? That definitely holds true in our city locations. But at the same time, we have 20 seats in Bank, we have 20 seats in Spitalfields, 10 in Fenchurch, and in Tottenham Court Road, for example, we have around 40 seats, and at lunch they're always full. So it's not at all exclusive to takeaway. And I think it would be nice in the future to have stores with a little bit more dine-in capacity, because there's obviously, for every person who wants to get their food and go back to the office, there are people, I could say to you, Steve, if you were in London, say, great, we don't work together, but you're my friend and you're in town, right? I need to take you to a place where we can kind of sit down, however casual we might want it to be. And so, it's important to have seating, even if the numbers show that it's majority takeaway.
Yeah. I suppose it's interesting as you move to different areas, that might be the balance that you do. You make it more of an occasion to go to rather than flying in and out on a lunchtime madness. But it's incredible. I mean, you must, as you go around London and go past the stores and you see these queues, which obviously it's a very British thing, that's why we love it. But to most people, they're going, "Oh my God!" But it's like, I mean, it's the greatest advert for the store going, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I'm not sure I'd recommend doing, because you're really playing kind of Russian roulette with it. But if you go and stand in the queue of a store you own, and obviously not in uniform or anything, you'll hear a lot of feedback. You will hear a lot of feedback that you don't necessarily
market research. Yeah,
you have not asked for, and more time than others, it's generally you get hit with. It's it's the excitement of, what are you going to get? Last time I had this and it was amazing, or like thing. And then sometimes you do hear like kind of a comments like, "Can you believe we're queuing 20 minutes for a salad in February in London?" And you're like, "Yeah, but you are." Like I can't quite believe it either, but you are.
Thanks, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, it's always a bit of a great feeling. Like obviously when I walk around with like my fiance or something, and you see, your 10 minutes from a store and you just see one of your bags walking past and you're like, that's pretty crazy.
And just talking, obviously talked about February there. Is there a seasonality to demand?
Again, I mean, we're very lucky in, I remember it clear as day, my dad, who is, he's pushing his late 80s, this whole kind of, when I told him what I wanted to do, it was definitely hit with a bit of, are you sure about this?
Yeah.
And one of his main concerns was, look, James, for God's sake, I get it. You might sell a few salads in June and July, but what the hell are you going to do the rest of the year? And, he's been completely proven wrong, which he's happy to admit. The only time we have a real downside is kind of 10 days before Christmas, right? Yeah. At that point, even us are kind of like, we're mine somewhere else.
Dirty food tower, isn't it?
Yeah, and you're either hungover from the night before, or you're being taken out to lunch, or you're already working from home because you're with your family.
Finished, yeah.
And it's cold, and then you hit January, and everyone's in New Year, New Me, and it's great, so it's can be -1, and we can be as busy as ever. And our best times are probably kind of spring and autumn, and then kind of like early summer. I think obviously people go away in August, so like London does get quieter.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're very lucky. It's 11 and a half months of a year. It's pretty good.
Brilliant. Right, I'd love to sort of move on and focus a bit about you and Flo as obviously a partnership, your two mates. It doesn't always work when you go into business, does it? How have you found, because obviously there's lots of jobs to do running your own business, from, like as you say, planning the first store to now running 8 and plans to get more. How have your two skill sets differed, and have you fallen into areas of the business naturally, or have you had to say, oh, I'll do that then?
Yeah, I know I wouldn't change any of this, but at the beginning, we very much said, well, neither of us know what we're doing, so let's both do it together, and hope that we can kind of collectively figure it out. And for the first kind of 9 months of opening the store, we did that. Every call with every software, every supplier, we'd both sit on the Zoom, and depending who had a coffee more recently would be paying more attention. And then, I remember it clear as day, we went for a nice steak dinner and we said, look, I think it's time we do something about this. And it was a wonderful conversation, except for we went to Entrecote in the city, and they're too damn quick. So we were having this lovely conversation. We were like, yeah, we're making really good progress here. 20 minutes or so, we were asked to leave.
You booted out.
But it came down to a very honest conversation about what do you enjoy, what do you find interesting, and more importantly, what do you not like. And me and Flo were very lucky in terms of outside of work. I'd say we're very, very similar, which is a great quality to have for us. But then inside of work, we work very differently. He is, and he won't mind me saying this, he's very detail orientated and, obsessed with the details. And, when he likes to do something, he likes to do it very methodically, step by step. And to the annoyance of him, I'm sure at times I'm kind of the opposite. I'm a bit more happy-go-lucky, like to make decisions with my gut, and I get distracted a bit more easily when it comes to like a big long task. And so there was a bit of a natural split there of the side of a business which required more attention to detail, and that kind of came into raising the money and dealing with the accountants, dealing with suppliers, dealing with the kind of HR setup. And then there was the operation side, which I kind of felt more excited about, very people focused.
Is that when you talk about operational, you mean like the front of house, like the theatre of the stores, and how you did the service and trained and brought that side of it?
Yeah. So fundamentally, we had a pretty big split there. And, Flo put it very well the other day. He said, Salad Project's our baby, and I'm in charge of its day-to-day schooling, and Flo's thinking about where it's going to go to college, which I think was quite a good way of saying it.
I like that. Yeah, so putting in that sort of behind the scenes structure to allow it to keep growing and growing and growing safely to keep everything together.
But what's great is we work quite independently to an extent because there's a lot of trust there between us. So I trust you and he trusts myself, but then we do a lot of kind of work together where we just sense check things, because it's quite easy to go down a bit of a rabbit hole when you're kind of a little bit siloed. And so we always do check with each other on things, and it's maybe I don't know if I want to use this terminology, but Flo describes it when we're together as our brains having sex, and that magic happens when we bring our two sides of our brain together, and it seems to work so far. We got very lucky on a lot of big decisions.
Well, you talk about luck, isn't it? But I've now been really lucky to interview quite a lot of people on the podcast, and it's the hard work and the planning and like you say, the using of your gut. Now, for me, a lot of gut decisions it's where you hold your experience. And people talk, some people will be very analytical and will look at the data. And I know you guys use a lot of systems, don't you, to work out peaks and troughs of flow into stores, to plan your staff, that's one thing. But I also think you should never underestimate, because people nearly throw away that comment about, oh yeah, I've used my gut. But what for me the gut is a collection of all of my experiences there. And I know like 9 times out of 10, when I did this happened, and that's the outcome I want. But that trust's a really interesting thing. That's come through a lot as well in other conversations where friendships can go two ways with business, can't they? It can put you under pressure and you creak, or actually it becomes the glue that actually holds you together, because you say you've got trust, which is vital in a busy growing business.
I think we've got lucky in the fact that while I mentioned that our business ways of working is very kind of different in terms of how we work, our gut is always very similar. So I'd say 9 out of 10 our gut agree with each other. And so we firmly believe in trusting our gut on decisions, and, knowing that if it does go wrong, trusting our gut, then we can stand by it to ourselves pretty clearly. So
yeah, absolutely. And obviously part of it, you've read data and you've understood trends as well, and you've put that into that mix, isn't it? And so when you started, did you have a vision of where you'd like be now and where you would be in the future, or has it been more of an organic growth plan?
I think when we first started, I mean, me and Flo we said to each other, maybe incorrectly in terms of a mindset, but I don't know. But we looked at each other and said, do you want to manage one salad bar for 10 years of our lease? And we both were like, I don't. And he said, neither do I. So we said, okay, well, we want to kind of, go big or go home with this. And we wanted our first location to be as good as our 10th, right?
Right.
And so much of our concept is around the store and the customer experience, right? So we got told constantly, please open your first store in a cheaper location, go to the market first, go do delivery only. And we were like, no, we want to have our first store be a real example of what our brand's going to be. And it's either going to work and then we can replicate that, or it's going to be a massive disaster, but at least we're going to fail quickly.
You're going to know. You're going to know. Yeah.
And so, I mean, for us, it's always been like, the idea has always been to kind of make the Salad Project into a chain, which at least spread across London, if not further afield. We always felt pretty confident in it. Like couldn't think of any kind of obvious pitfalls why it wouldn't work. The customer base is here in London, and there was very little in terms of competition. So the only issue would have been as if we generally completely misunderstood what people wanted.
Yeah.
So I mean, has it gone better than I imagined it would go? Sure, it has, to be fair, because it's gone very well. But we always wanted it to be a chain, and we always set it up from the beginning to do that. And so now we're kind of at the stage where we are at the moment where 3 years ago we would always joke about, oh, imagine we got our office and we have our 15 people working in it, and now we're there and it feels great.
It is incredible, isn't it? But it's interesting talking about that, because some people will look to start their own business and the only measure of success being the money first. And it feels like what you've got is that you've got a concept you want to bring alive, and then you've trusted the money will follow. And I think that is a much, much healthier balance, because your decisions are made about getting the right profit. It's interesting what you said. If we do it right and put it in the right spot and get the thing right and it works, then it'll work everywhere. If you've done like that shortcut, people are going, yeah, it's all right, but it's a bit crap. I can't bother to go into the market, or all of those factors. You've never really known what you've got. So I think that was both brave, but very, very smart. And obviously, we've been proved right. We can say that because we know what we're sitting here talking about.
Exactly.
Successful.
Could have been a very different conversation, but yes.
So have you guys had to take in funding at all? Because obviously, kitting out retail and taking leases on it's not that cheap in London, is it?
Pretty capex heavy, yeah. Obviously we kind of raised our, first store of, from friends and family, and frankly, it wasn't enough money really, so that's why we made some mistakes in our first store. But got through that, and then we raised a bit of money to open store 3, 4, and 5, and then since that, the stores generate profit themselves, and we've opened the other kind of 4 stores based on that. And then the idea is at kind of some point at the end of this year, we raise a significant more money. That means we can kind of take the handbrake off a little bit, and
And then,
go a lot
I'm
quicker.
asking, was that initial for stores 3, 4, and 5? Was that debt that you took on, or was it equity?
It was equity. Yeah. I mean, we have, without saying names, we have some people who are very, very useful in our business. People who have worked in great hospitality brands for a long time. And so they offer a lot of great advice. And, what was great is they were customers more than anything. And, I'm not saying they had their first salad and came to us and said, let me invest. But, we knew that
it doesn't half help though if they're into the project, so to speak, isn't it?
Yeah, we knew they were customers, and then kind of like worked on them a little bit, and then we got some kind of people who kind of work more in the finance sector, family office type things, who are very involved as well. So we have a great support team that will kind of help when we do the handbrake off raise. I think
we've got access to some serious experience as well as cash, haven't you? Which was great.
We got access to, there's a lot of great names associated with our brand, kind of in the back end, and not only can they provide extra capital, but I think just in terms of, adding those grey hairs to our relatively young business.
No, that's amazing. That's really good, and it is. And I think some people are so scared of taking on debt or taking on equity, money for equity but if you've got a plan and a vision, sometimes it's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, it'll just take too long, and you'll be too tired when you get to that stage, won't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the business we're in, there is, I wouldn't say speed is everything, because famously, you drive too fast, you will lose control. But we're in the chain business, right? 100%. We're not trying to, yes, the store economics are incredibly important, and that's why we haven't opened 10 more than we have now. But, we are in the business of getting this out there to more and more places, So, yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. So you talked about, obviously, at first, you and Flo literally doing everything, serving, cooking, chopping, all of that sort of thing. And now you've evolved into your 2 roles, and you've brought in, is it Clementine, did you say that?
Yeah, Clem has been here since the beginning, so we were very lucky to find her. She is a friend of a friend, effectively, but she's wonderful. She went to Oxford and then had a great career, and then kind of decided to, thankfully for us, follow her passion of food. So she left her job to go study at Ballymaloe in Ireland, which is obviously a very well-respected cooking school. And we were lucky enough to kind of meet her and ask her to kind of be our kind of recipe developer predominantly at first. And she came in, did an awesome job, created, the foundations of our business, and has been around ever since, and is now like an incredibly valued member of our leadership team, handles all things culinary and incredibly all things marketing as well, which is wonderful because she leads our two biggest departments, and this, they sync very well together. Our marketing should be around our food.
That product, yeah.
So she's a wonderful, wonderful addition to the team.
It's amazing, isn't it? You just forget all the elements that you do need with this business as it grows, and she will understand how trends will change and products will come into fashion from that end. And so, in terms of, obviously that's a senior role, you were telling me nearly over 190 on board now in terms of the team, which is, it's quite a headache, isn't it? People in a nice way, we're obviously dealing with people's livelihoods. We pay the wages and all of that. So how have you found being able to keep control of that and making sure that the people that you bring in to the project, I keep using that, sorry, but why not? But as you keep bringing them in, that they are the right people to deliver your brand?
Sure. I mean, I think we're around 190 now in terms of, people who have some kind of contract with the Salad Project, which is insane. Obviously, that varies from people who do a couple of lunch shifts to, our head of finance, who is much more involved. Truth be told, Flo, I think, lost track of who everyone was kind of after the third store. I stuck around a little bit longer. I think I knew everyone until we got to the kind of opening of our 7th store. And now I'm pretty much only at first name basis with kind of the supervisors and above. And that's not from a lack of trying. It's just, obviously there's so many of them, and
it's physically impossible to get around, isn't it? Yeah.
Physically impossible. But obviously we have a structure like any other business where, there are general managers who know their team, and then there are the operation managers who know their cluster of stores. And, we have a wonderful HR team who, honestly, our head of HR could tell you more about our team than I think she'd like to admit. I list a name and she says, KP, Tottenham Court Road, does 8 hours a week and names his shifts and a couple of facts about him. So she's doing a wonderful job at keeping up, but I reckon she's only got 2 stores left before she
has to then do that tier system down. Yeah. And it is. And do you operate, have you got like a published culture that people can get behind? Is that something that you've actually formulated down so people, as you grow, you obviously, in the past you'd have gone in and met the new starter and given them the insight and the passion behind it, or Flo would have. You can't do that now. So have you sort of written this down now? Has it become codified so people can get behind it?
I think that's one of the things about doing a business that has been really interesting, how at various stages it has felt important, and in various stages it's like, this is the most annoying thing in the world. I remember before opening we sat there and in Flo's kitchen and spoke about our compass and what that meant, and then quickly opened the store and realized it meant nothing, and we just got to kind of get our head down and make salads. We have tried to formalize kind of culture in terms of like things, in terms of values and stuff. And we do have, certain values that are set in place in terms of what we expect from our team. Do I think we can get better at it? Yes, I do, to be honest, in terms of like, making the team feel more cohesive in terms of like moving in the same direction, but also kind of probably investing a little bit more in people's journeys at the Salad Project. And to your point about how we quickly realized that the culture can't exist from me and Flo taking everyone out for drinks at Christmas, like that finished pretty quickly. And one thing Flo implemented quite early on, which I think is great and has been really useful, is he was listening to a podcast about the British Army and how speaks of the volumes of how his brain works. But he was like, okay, so you got the Scots Guards, and then you got the kind of, I'm going to test my British knowledge of the army, but you got your Irish Grenadiers or whatever you have, and there was a real distinctness around what it meant to be part of each unit. And we realized, well, Flo realized very well that, Spitalfields has a very different team and kind of subculture than you do in Oxford Circus. In Oxford Circus, you're kind of surrounded by the universities. You have a much more kind of like transient population, I'd say, of, university students who come for kind of 3, 4, 5 months, a lot more part-time, a lot younger, more into kind of like socializing, building friendships, drinking, and like, so their culture might be kind of more around, we'd like money to go to the pub for drinks and kind of like do something like that. Whereas in Spitalfields, obviously we're kind of like, Spitalfields location wise is quite close to Whitechapel, etc. And we have a lot of Muslim people working in that store, and they have no interest in going for drinks, right? And so like in Spitalfields, the culture there, a lot of the activities they do are around activities. So they will do bowling, they'll do go-karting, and those cultures have really thrived in independency in the stores, and which is great because trying to have one overarching culture for all the team, and frankly isn't really possible. And we have little things like each store has a name day and a birthday, where they have 2 events a year at least where they can kind of go do what they want to do, and we don't impose it at all. And everyone in the team, from the kitchen porter to the manager, will decide what do we want to do, and it's great.
That's interesting. So it's nearly the product and offer that is the common brand element, isn't it? And then each then gets delivered uniquely for its geographical location, depending, like you say, on the team and the customer and how they interact and what each wants. Quite powerful, isn't it? Because that means you can keep control, but then morph to the area that to make it work. So they don't go in and go, oh my God, this is like I feel like I'm in the city, and I'm not. I'm in the middle of the West End. It doesn't feel right. Whereas it adapts.
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to store design, right? We're opening some stores this year which are in different locations than we currently operate. And I think if you were to look at those stores compared to the ones in the city, you'd be quite shocked by the starkness in contrast. Yeah. Which is super important because, in some of these kind of more residential areas, you're trying to get someone to come and spend an hour and a half there over a long lunch with a friend. And so that whole environment has to be very different from a person who is ordering on the app to collect before their big meeting in 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got to feel that there's a place you want to be rather than just pass through. Yeah. Brilliant challenges though, isn't it? Like you say, as you adapt, and you won't, I think it's interesting, you said a few times, and I think it's nice, your honesty is lovely, because people will look from the outside and see the salad project and see these beautiful stores and these queues outside the door and think, they've got it. And you've talked a lot about where it's gone wrong. And the key is that you don't keep making the same mistakes, obviously, but you have to trial and error, don't you, to make sure you can improve your offer.
Yeah, we often get asked, like, what was the biggest mistake you've made? And we luckily, to this point, have not made any big mistakes, because I think we've allowed us to make a lot of small ones, right? So we've allowed us to make a lot of small mistakes that we've managed to be very open about. We're like, this is going wrong, let's fix it before, we haven't had a point where we've been able to say to you, oh, well, Steve, there are 4 times where this business almost fell apart because of a stupid mistake we made, which is great. Touching wood. It stays
touch wood everywhere. That's brilliant. And so obviously you didn't think you were busy enough, with 8 stores and opening a few more. You guys have also just about to launch your own book, aren't you?
Yeah. Again, that's, that really is a, credit there should fall very much squarely on Clem's shoulders. She became a complete dork over last summer and just wrote, kind of like Alexander Hamilton writing away. And she did, crazy amount of recipes in a short period of time based on kind of time pressures from the publishers. And yeah, we're releasing the book in April. the Salad Project cookbook. It's all about, lots of different types of salads, but it's all about the dressings that make them so special. And obviously, it tells a little bit about our journey. And yeah, it's a great little it's a great milestone. It's one of those things.
It must be a real pinch yourself moment that suddenly there are all these bookstores saying, buy your early copy now, and thinking, what?
Yeah, I mean, like high street brands have cookbooks, brands that people see on the high street and know about, and so like to be amongst that is pretty cool, and it's great. The idea that you're based up in Leeds, right, Steve?
Yeah,
you'll be able to walk into your local Waterstones and buy a cookbook.
So in terms of you've obviously not been going too long with this project. It's coming up for 6 years, isn't it? Obviously, you had the slight delay. Started in 2019, but didn't actually. The first store was 21, was it?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think, but our first store didn't open not even 4 years yet. 4 years in May. So 4 years.
We haven't got a long period of reflection. Sometimes these people have been running these businesses for 20 years and they go about. But is there anything that you and Flo would like to say to slightly younger James and Flo when you were kicking off this project, when you handed your notice in from your corporate jobs, that you go, oh, I wish we'd known that. Or you maybe still haven't learnt it yet, James.
It's tough because I would, I'd like to say go back and be like, gamble more and kind of, be more aggressive with the stores you could have opened.
Okay.
But I say that now with like making assumptions of how it would have gone. Mm-hmm. It could have gone really badly. Like, I mean, when we opened our bank store, the first couple of months was, it's the second time we've ever opened a store. Very different than first because, we had two of them and, we had stupid hours we were open, we had stupid staff cost-wise, and, we lost a lot of money in the first couple of months. And so if we were more aggressive and did that a couple more times, like, it could have really hurt us. So,
yeah.
While I would like to say, like, be more bullish and have opened more stores and, hopefully now be sitting on 12, 13, not 7 or 8, I can't say that it would have produced great results. It could have also been a mistake. So, no, I mean, I think, there's a few little boring details I could say I wish we did earlier. But as a whole, I think it's really important to enjoy the journey you go on. And, if I was to replace some of the lowlights, in retrospectively, it would have just been replaced with others.
Yeah.
And,
I think that's very honest. Yeah.
And it's one of the best things about doing a business with your best friend, and I've always said this, is the highs are phenomenal because you get to share it with someone who you really care about, and you're really happy that seeing the success for each other. And then the lows are not nearly as low. Like there are times where we didn't get X or we didn't do Y, and you kind of just almost laugh with each other and be like, crazy that we're even in this situation. Like. Yeah. So
gives you a nice sense of perspective, doesn't it? Like you say, your problem shared is a problem halved. That angle, isn't it? Really.
Totally.
Brilliant. Oh, James, that's been so interesting. It's just absolutely fascinating. It's amazing what you're doing, and I think your approach is refreshing for people. Hopefully, will listen to that to understand that if you stick to what you know and you continue to deliver that consistency, the brand will grow and people will get on, won't it? And you've got all those lessons in there. So thank you for sharing that story and thank you for giving us the time.
No problem. I think I would just, hospitality is a great industry, and, the idea of what we did do is nothing novel. And I'm sure and I know there are countless people who've walked into the Salad Project saying, I thought about doing this, well done for doing it. So, if you think you believe in something and you have the opportunity to do it, or even if you don't have the opportunity to do it, try and find a way to find that opportunity, because, all you got to do is believe in it. Makes it sound a little bit easy, but, got to give it a go. Otherwise, you're going to have regret.
Well, if you don't try, you never will succeed. So, yeah, I like that. That can be your soundbite at the end. So thanks very much, James. Really enjoyed it.
No problem. Very nice to speak to you, Steve.